we're doing this. Learning how to knit by making a kitchen towel or something, that's boring. We're doing the hard stuff. You're gonna learn by making a sweater, an entire sweater. That's what we're doing. Listen, you and me, we are in this together. I'm gonna get the same supplies that you're gonna get, and I'm gonna show you everything step by step, which means that if you've already knitted before, parts of this might be a bit boring to you, and I would recommend you skip these parts. But if you haven't knitted before, then you're gonna learn everything you need to know, and it's gonna be step by step, and I'm gonna make it as clearly as possible. A quick note on all of this. I'm doing this for free. I'm doing it step by step for you as a beginner, because when I started knitting, I also didn't really want to commit to buying a pattern, to buying instructions, to buying courses or something, and that is perfectly fine. I'm all for open sharing of knowledge, and I really want you to have a positive experience for your first sweater you're going to knit. But I work a job. I'm doing this in my spare time, so I've set up a Patreon. Now, I don't expect to get rich off of this at all, but if you do like these videos, if you like this series, if you're embarking on this journey with me, do consider becoming a Patreon patron to my channel. There are two different tiers at the moment. One is called the Crafty Charmer, which is the lower tier, and there you'll get one free pattern per year. Then you'll also get some exclusive updates. You'll get voting rights on kind of what my next video should be when I need help in decision, and also some other fun stuff, like if I'm indecisive between colors on a project, you can also help me decide on that. And then there's also the higher tier, the Crafty Champion, where you'll get 3 free patterns per year. And I'm also kind of still coming up with some bonus content for the higher tiers, which I will expand on that as we go. But please do consider supporting me there, because this series is going to take up a lot of my free time. For this video, I'm creating a measurement chart, which you can download on my Patreon, which is linked down below, even if you don't become a patron. So it's open for public, and kind of basic instructions. It's not really a pattern, but more like I made a sheet where you can kind of follow and remember what I told you in the video on there as well. They're not just any old boring instructions. They're designed, they have charts, they have pictures, you have a calculating sheet where you can fill in your measurements. This is, I have to say myself, I think it is a work of art. So, I mean, if that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. If you have anything to spare, do go over to Patreon. It would be awesome if you wanted to support me there. If not, I fully understand, that's fine too. But yeah, I'm kind of jumping over this hurdle of insecurity here because it needs to be said. But without further ado, let's get started. We're doing it. The basic supplies you're going to need. First of all, before we're even talking about yarn, we're talking about everything else. So first, you're going to need needles. Now, I recommend that you get interchangeable needles, and this means that you have needles that have like, they look like they're missing something here. And then you also get these cords, and these cords are the thing you're actually gonna screw the needle onto later. So what you're going to need is interchangeable needles like these. I would recommend you to get wooden needles because they're much easier to work with when you're a beginner. If you're from the EU or you can just order these kinds of needles, I would recommend you to get interchangeable needles by Prim, which I find are almost like the best beginner knitter needles. I asked my knitting friend Christina, who is from California, to tell me which needles are available in the US, because that's something I didn't know. And she told me that both at Joann's and Michael's you can get the Prim interchangeable needles, but they're not inexpensive. So keep that in mind. You might pay around $10 per interchangeable needles, and you need to get 2, so that's already 20. Then you also need the cables. So there are other options as well. If you can't get the prim ones, you can get bamboo interchangeable needles. It's best if you just go to your shop and kind of see what you find, or otherwise you can order it online. You're going to get size 8mm needles, which is US 11, and you're also going to need another pair. You're going to need the size 6mm, which is US 10. Next, you need something to actually screw them onto, right? So you're gonna get 2 50cm cables, which is 20 inches. You can also get the 60cm one, which is, I guess, 24 inches, but I would recommend you to get the smaller ones because it's gonna be easier to work with. And then you need a larger cable. This one is a 100cm cable, which is 4 inches. This one we're going to need for the circumference of the upper chest and body later. And then when you get the interchangeables and the cables, they're actually always delivered with stoppers to screw onto the end when you don't need the cable at the moment. And they're also going to be delivered with something like this. This is a bit fancy. Yours is probably maybe just like a metal pin, which you can actually stick through the needle to screw your needle onto it. But you need a bit more supplies. So what you need is scissors, just some basic household scissors will do. And you're also going to need a darning needle. Now a darning needle looks like a sewing needle, but it is larger, thicker. It doesn't have a pointy end. The end is really not pointy. And it has a larger opening here in the back to put your yarn through. So you're going to need one of these. Then you need stitch markers. Now, maybe you already have stitch markers at home, who knows? If you don't have any stitch markers at home, you can use some old leftover yarn or just any leftover thread that is a bit thicker, and you tie them into a knot that they create a little circle, and that's perfectly fine. But you're going to need 8 of these. Now I have some from Coco Knits. These are specifically made to use with larger needles. I'm going to use these, but you can really just make your own and get it in 2 different colors, so 4 of each color. And then you're also going to need a measuring band or measuring tape because we're going to make this sweater to your measurements. And then finally, you're going to need a sweater that you already have and like and fits you well. One that really has like all the things you like, especially the color, height needs to be the way you like it, and kind of the width of the armholes, because we're working off of this information for your sweaters. And you're going to get a yarn where when you read this label, down here you find some information. When you read this, it maybe will say that it's to be knitted with 8mm needles. That's already a good indication. But much more important is how many meters or yards it is per how many grams. I'm quickly back on a different day because I did end up changing yarns. So the yarn I'm using now is this El Pacino Merino by Wool and the Gang. This yarn has 100 grams and is 100 meter per 100 grams. So if you get a yarn that is somewhere between 75 meters to 50 meters per 50 gram, then that would be a good yarn. This yarn actually says it's recommended to be knitted with 6.5mm needles. For this one, I don't think that applies. I always knitted with at least 8mm. So I would recommend you get a yarn that is not fluffy. Get a yarn that has like kind of this flat texture because it's easier for you to work with. And I would also recommend you to get a light colored yarn. Don't get black, don't get dark blue. It's much harder to work with darker colors if you have to see strands or the stitch definition. So get a lighter color because that will be easier for you to work with as a beginner. Now, I actually came up with a very, very easy way to include some color into this sweater that doesn't really include a very hard method or anything, is to keep the strand that you're knitting with the same, but adding a strand of a fluffy, thinner yarn that has a color. So we're going to create stripes in our sweater that are very easy to knit, and for this I got some. This is Suri alpaca. This is Suri alpaca. I got a few more colors than these, but we're going to knit these in with this yarn, just holding the strand together from time to time to create stripes. If you want to get this as well, this is Suri alpaca by Lang Yarns. You can also get another type of Suri alpaca. What you need to look out for is that it's not too thick. This is the updated yarn basket with the new yarns. Quickly going back to our label here, and I told you before that it already kind of indicates here how many stitches it had in their gauge swatch. You can take this number to see how many stitches you need to cast on. If it says 11 here, I always go 1 or 2 stitches up because maybe my stitch tension is tighter, and so I want a bit more stitches that I actually get 13. Now I removed the label, and there's actually always 2 access points to a skein that is skeined up like this. There's one quite easily accessible that goes around the skein, but there's also another access point from the inside, and depending on the yarn, this is easy or hard to find if you have to pull quite hard. Maybe take the outer point, it's fine. It just means that your skein will roll around a bit while you unravel it. I got the inside, and I took a lot out of it, but I'm going to use that anyway. I know that, so it's fine. But actually, if you pull out a lot like this, you call that yarn vomit because more than you want actually comes out. But I found the inside access point here, and I'm going to get this end now. So what we're doing here first, for the gauge swatch, we're going to leave a tail that is about tip of my fingers to my elbow, more or less. Let's take a bit more. Doesn't really matter if you took too much here. Also, if you actually end up needing this yarn, you can also open up this gauge swatch later. And now the first thing you need to do is a slip knot. You're going to make a slip knot. Now a slip knot is, so what I'm doing is I'm just holding the yarn like this in my fingers, and then I'm holding it down here, and I'm giving it a twist. So now we have kind of a loop here, and then I am taking my thumb and index finger and going through this and grabbing the yarn. So loop, index finger and thumb through it, grab the yarn that is here on the tail, and then pull it through, and then pull it tight. Now it is a huge loop, and I can actually insert my index finger here and pull a bit on both strands to make it a bit smaller, but still leave a large enough loop to insert your needle. You insert your needle with the tail, so on the upper side, and the working yarn. Working yarn means the yarn that is still connected to the skein we're working off is on the lower side. And then you pull on both ends again, and now it's nice and secure on your needles. Okay, so next up, I'm taking my left hand and I'm inserting my small finger. I'm inserting here between the 2 strands, and I'm taking the yarn tail here in between my small finger and my ring finger, and then I'm turning my hand down, and I'm taking my index finger, and from the front I go in between the 2 strands and I twist it around my index finger twice. This is how I hold my working yarn. Maybe you have a different method, but that's how I do it, because that gives me enough tension here so that it doesn't slip off. You can also just twist it around once if you feel the tension is too high, but this is the way I do it. And then next I take my thumb and I go below the strand that is still connected to my skein, and I use my ring and small finger here to hold this strand. And then I get this posture. And then when I hold it like this, I kind of twist it to look at it like this, so that I have kind of a loop here and a straight strand here, and my yarn is still connected to the needle here. And then we're actually casting on a stitch by going from below through the loop on the thumb from below. And now I'm grabbing the upper yarn. I'm going from above the upper yarn under it. This is how it looks like now. And now once I grabbed this yarn above, I'm going through the thumb here. I'm letting go and I'm tightening this stitch. Don't tighten it too much. You don't want it to be very tight, but just pulling at it a bit. Okay, so we're doing it again. We're again in this first posture here, and I'm going from below. I'm going through the loop on my thumb. Then I'm grabbing the upper yarn by going above and below. Now it looks like this. Now I go back through the loop on my thumb. I pull out my thumb, let it go, and I tighten the stitch. We got 3 stitches now. Now we're doing it again. From below through the loop on the thumb, from above getting the yarn there and pulling it through the thumb loop. 4 stitches. I will continue doing it a bit faster now. Now we're going back and counting this again. This is our slip knot, 1, 2, 3, 11. These are 11 stitches. This is the basic cast on method, the one you're going to need the most throughout your knitting journey. So that's how you do it. Now you were holding your needle with your right hand side, right? So now we're actually going to twist it to the other side so that the little bumps our casting on created are actually now on the lower side, and we're holding it with our left hand side. We're still kind of letting this tail just be. We're gonna let it dangle here. And now we're going to put the yarn around our hands again, as I showed you before with casting on. And then we're going to take the other needle we have here into our right hand, and we are going to make some purl stitches first. So when we knit stockinette stitch, we actually purl on the back sides and knit on the front sides. And purl means that on the back sides we get these bumps, and you can remember that nicely because if you see a bump, then it is a purl. So when you purl, you take your working yarn here and you put it in front of your work. And then I always take my thumb to see what is happening here a bit better. I take my thumb and I pull this down so that I can see my stitch again. So now you're going to very slowly and carefully want to push your stitches a bit to the front and take your right needle, insert it through the stitch like this. So from right to left, you're going in with your needle tip. And now I will actually just pull the yarn over the needle tip, so kind of wind it over the needle tip. Now, it is very helpful for me, at least, if I take my thumb again and pull it down here and kind of hold it in place, because then it's nice and tight around my tip. And then I actually going to take my needle tip and go back through the stitch and pull up this loop and drop it. You can use the tail here to tighten it a bit. And now I'm going to do the same with the next one. So again, I'm going to pull it down a bit with my thumb so that I actually see the stitch. I'm going to insert my needle from right to left. I'm going to wind my yarn over the needle tip counterclockwise. And now that I did this, I'm going to pull my needle tip through, and then I drop the stitch off the needle. Again, next one, go in from right to left, put the yarn over the needle, use your thumb to kind of hold it in place, pull the needle tip back through and drop it off your stitch. One more time, right to left, pull it over your needle tip and go like this. And then you just keep doing that for all the stitches on your needles until you knitted, or rather purled, your last stitch. Going to continue like this. If you need to watch it again, then watch it again. I'm going to make it a bit faster now. Okay, one stitch left on the needle, going in again from right to left, putting it over, pulling it through, and then I can just pull this needle out and I will now turn around, kind of pull the stitches apart, and this was our first row, our purl row. Now we're actually going to knit a row. So once again, you're going to get the yarn around your fingers the way I showed it to you in the cast on step. And now when we knit, we go into the stitch, not from right to left, but from left to right. So we actually stab it from below. So we have our working yarn in the back. It's no longer in the front, now it's in the back. We go in from below through our first stitch. I always use my thumb here to hold the stitch in place that it doesn't drop off my needles. Now we're going again from left to right. And then I'm actually going above this yarn I have here in the back. Now again, getting a finger to help me. I am taking my index finger from my right hand side. So I'm going to hold this in place again. And now using this to push it a bit down, I'm going to get my needle back through the loop and drop the stitch. Now this stitch is always a bit big, the first one. You can kind of pull on the strand back here and make it a bit smaller. We're doing it again. We're going from left to right through the stitch, looks like this. Then we're grabbing our working yarn, we're going from above and below, we're pulling it through and we're dropping it off. Again, from left to right here, grabbing our working yarn. I use my index finger again to help and pull it through. We're going a bit faster now, above and pull it through. And now again here and pull it through. One more time. From left to right, yarn around and pull it through. Left to right. Now this is actually I yarn over here, meaning I'm taking the yarn and going over the needle with it. Or if you're looking from the point of view from the needle, you're actually going with the needle from the right side below the yarn strand, right? But you actually call this yarn over. This sometimes comes up in pattern and is called yarn over. The last stitch isn't really special. I'm just using my thumb here to really hold it because otherwise it could slip off. And going again from the left to the right, yarn over the needle and pull it through, and all our stitches have been knitted. Now we're actually starting to get a bit of length here. So the next row is a purl row, and you're just going to continue the exact same way you did just now until you have your length. That's when we'll meet again. I'll show you how to cast off your stitches. We are back. We've knitted a few rows and I've been measuring it. It has been 10 centimeters for a bit, but you want to end with a purl row. So the last row you made before we cast off was a purl row. If you knit 10 centimeters and the next row that you need to make would be a purl row, do purl that row and come back once you're on a knit row. So the next stitches here should be knitted. And now we're actually casting off the stitches. Now I'm going to, the same way as I knit in a regular row, I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches. I trust that you figured this out by now, so I'm not gonna show you how to knit 2 stitches slowly, but I'm knitting these 2. And now we're actually casting off by always pulling the second stitch on our needle over the first stitch. So I'm inserting my left needle from the left to the right through the second stitch, and I'm taking my index finger here to hold this in place, and I'm taking my thumb to hold this in place. And then I will take my second needle and pull the stitch over. I'm letting it go from the left needle, and now I have 1 stitch here, and I've pulled this stitch over this one, so I've already cast off 1 stitch. And now from here I continue by always knitting 1 stitch and then pulling the second stitch over my first stitch. Once more, I knit 1 stitch, inserting my needle into the second stitch from left to right and pulling it over until I have only one stitch left on my needles. So I did it. I also did it with the second to last stitch, and now I have only one stitch left on this needle. Now I'm taking the needle and I'm pulling a bit more of the yarn through. I have a very big loop now, and now we will be leaving a tail a bit. Doesn't need to be that much, but like just like this. And I'm cutting my yarn here, putting my skein away, and now you're done once you've just pulled out your strand. So now you have your nice square here. This is your gauge swatch. Now we're going to block this. Now, if this were a sweater, we would be filling water into our sink or our bathtub, and we would take cold to lukewarm water. Really don't make it too warm and submerge our sweater, but we only have like this small batch here, so I just got a medium-sized bowl, put some water into it also, and then I just place it in the bowl, and I'm just going to press out the leftover air. There's no more dry patches here, so I can leave this, and we're leaving this for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're coming back. Now it's been 15 minutes, and get a hand towel, take your little gauge swatch here, push out the remaining water, don't twist it, you don't want to stretch out the stitches. Get your towel here and place the gauge swatch flat onto it. Now I'm going to kind of cover it, and then I'm just going to push on this to press out any excess water so that it dries faster. Now you can lay it on any flat and non-porous surface to dry. I actually fashioned a little blocking mat out of an old piece of cardboard, and I wrapped a piece of saran wrap around it several times, and I will just be placing this onto here and just pinning down my corners, because as you see here, it kind of twists inward because the cast on edge is always a bit tighter than the rest is going to be. I'm not actually stretching this part at all. I really do not want to stretch that, but I'm just stretching the cast on and cast off edge a bit, so that my piece actually is a bit more straight. As you see here, it even curves a bit because I'm really not stretching it. Only the edge, because I want the edge to kind of pull it to the width that the rest of the piece would have anyway. And now you really want to let it dry fully. Okay, I know that you can measure on your own, but we want to see that we get the right measurements, so I'm showing you how I'm doing this as well. So I'm going to measure first the height of my collar. This is 10 centimeters. I'm going to go a bit shorter. I'm going to go with 8 centimeters. Next, we're measuring the width of the collar here. So kind of to find out the circumference. 21 centimeters, 42, or I guess 16.5 inches. The next measurement we're going to get is from here to here, kind of the middle of the body where the underarm stops. This is the height of our yoke. So let's see, this is around 26 centimeters for me and 10.25 inches. The next measurement is the bust circumference. So from here to here, I don't know if you still see this, yes you do, 53 centimeters here, times 2 is 106 centimeters, and switching it to the other side, it's about 20.75 inches times 2, which is 41.5. Quick math. The next measurement we're getting is here. We want to know how high the armholes are. Now this armhole is angled. I'm going to be careful that I kind of get this straight here, but this is 22 centimeters, which is times 2 because again it's a circumference, then we're 44 centimeters. Now the sleeve length, because this sweater is constructed differently, or different to how ours is going to be constructed later, is going to be a bit different. It doesn't really matter because we can still adjust that later, but this one will be 40 centimeters. I'm going to take it down anyway. Go to the cuff and measure the circumference of that. So I have 11 centimeters. To multiply this by 2 because I need the circumference. So I have 22 centimeters. If you kind of like the length of the cuff, this is something you can individualize later, but I actually like the length of the cuff a lot here, and it is 8 centimeters, which is 3 inches. As that measurement is the length of the entire sweater from the edge of the collar to the bottom, 56 centimeters in the end. That is the right length for me, which, let's twist around, is exactly 22 inches. I'm getting a needle because it's easier to count then. Well, first we're going to go and measure the width, and so this is my first stitch now, and I'm going to be holding it down, and now I'm just going to be counting all the stitches that I have from here up until to the 10 centimeter, or on the other side the 4-inch mark. So I have 1, 2, 3, 11. Okay. And so now I know that in my 10 times 10 centimeters gauge swatch, the stitch number for the width is 11. And now to measure the height, I am going to go also somewhere in the middle of the fabric. Now, just a little side note, I already pre-calculated my pattern, and I had a different gauge swatch where I got a bit fewer stitches. So from now on, when you're going to see me fill all the numbers in, you're going to see me write 14 stitches for the height. I'm now going to be filling in my calculation sheet. So on the left side of the dash we always have kind of the centimeter, or if you're filling in the inch sheet then the inch numbers, and on the right side we always have either, in this column we have like the width, so the stitches, and in this column we have the height, so the rows, always on the left side. So I'm going to be filling this in now. For my gauge swatch I got 11 stitches. And now we're getting to the part of actually calculating how we're going to get the ratio, which I have explained in detail here, but I'm quickly going to just tell you. We are going to divide the number of stitches by the number of centimeters. So I will be dividing 11 by 10 and 14 by 10, and then afterwards you have the number of stitches and rows you're going to need per, in this case, centimeters, or in the other case inches as well. And this means I get a ratio of 1.1 here, so I need 1.1 times as many stitches as I need centimeters, and for the rows I need 1.4 times as many rows as I need centimeters. So I will run that through my calculator and then fill it in, but before I fill it in I will be rounding the stitches to the next closest number divisible by 2. So let me give you an example. If I, for instance, collar height, calculate 16 by 1.4, then I get 22.4. So I'm going to be rounding it to the next number divisible by 2, which is 22. So I will be filling this in for all my the rest of the numbers as well. These you can also download on my Patreon. You also have the shopping list once again here, and then you will you can read through this. So make these calculations as well, read through the instructions, and then fill in the right numbers over here, and then you can write everything into this first part of the pattern, which will cover what we're doing in the video this week, and then next week we're going to go further and I will update the instructions. We now have a cat in screen, but that you have to live with. So now I'm actually going to cast on 46 stitches, but because we're going to be knitting in the round, I will cast on 1 extra stitch, which you will do too. So get your number for the collar circumference that you need and cast on 1 stitch more. So first, because we're doing the long tail cast on, you're gonna leave a quite long end. So kind of the general rule of thumb is you leave a tail that is 3 times as long as the circumference of the thing you want to actually knit, which tends to turn out to be a bit too much, but that doesn't matter because you will need a long end to weave in anyway. And now I will make my slip knot the way you learned it earlier. Because we want a loose cast on edge, because we want this to fit over our head, I'm going to take the 8mm, the larger one, the US 11 needle first, and I'm going to cast on the stitches with this. So cast on your amount of stitches plus 1 with this needle, going through the loop so that our tail is in the back and our working yarn is in the front. I'm pulling this a bit, and now I'm just going to do what I showed you earlier. I'm going to cast on stitches in this way. I've cast on my 47 stitches now, and now we're going to be closing for the round, which is why we cast on 1 extra stitch. So now I'm going to spread the stitches over my needle, and in the beginning this might be a bit tight because we just cast on for a collar, which is going to be a bit tighter later, meaning we will have to pull the stitches quite a bit, and that is fine. Like, don't be worried about pulling them too much or anything. Spread your stitches so that this front stitch is still close enough to this front, and that on the other side you also have your front stitches on the front so that you can actually use them. So, and now that they're spread, I will actually going to be lifting this one off onto this needle, not knitting, but lifting it off onto it and then pulling this one over this one. So this is what we're doing now. I'm lifting it onto the left needle and onto the right needle, sorry. And now I'm just with the tip of this needle, of the left needle, going through the second stitch here. And this one has a bit more give because it's from our cast on stitch. And now I've lifted it over. I still have the stitch that I lifted from here to here on here. And now I will actually just be dropping this. And now it's important that you quickly tug on all the tails you have here. When you kind of pull the stitches to lift off the stitch, you will want to see that it isn't twisted. So you want your kind of this edge here that you have, this line that you have, you want this to look towards the middle and be twisted nowhere. I got my first stitch marker and I'm putting it here so that I know where the beginning of the round is. And now before we're actually going to switch to the smaller needle, to the thinner needle actually, I will be knitting this first row with the 8mm needle. And now we're actually going to combine knitting and purling. We are always going to knit one and then purl one, and then knit one and then purl one, and we will just keep doing this. So let's actually start. It is still going to be very tight here. This is going to relax after the first 2 rounds, so don't worry. But like, if you feel that you can't really lift off the stitch, then just go back and kind of pull it apart where you can and give you some give for the front here. And now I'm going to be starting. I'm knitting this stitch. The first one is going to be knitted, and then the second one is going to be purled. A knit stitch, and then again a purl stitch, and then again having to pull the stitches up here. So then I have a knit stitch and a purl stitch from the numbers if you're counting. Every even stitch is a purl stitch, every uneven stitch is a knit stitch. So you can also always, if you forgot where you were, you can check here. If you see a purl bump, then you know the next one is going to be a knit stitch. And now I knitted it, and then I see a nice knitted V, then I know the next one is a purl stitch. And you're just going to continue doing that until the end of the round. We are one step further now. We have 2 stitches left. So my last stitch was a purl stitch, so the next one will be a knit stitch, and then I have one more purl stitch, and now I am back at my stitch marker. So my cable quickly slipped out here. If this happened to you at any point, don't worry about it. Now we're actually going to screw the 6mm needles onto the second smaller cable that we have, and we're going to use these to continue knitting this. I can just let the right needle dangle here. I'm going to get the yarn back onto my hands, and then I am actually just going to continue the same way. And then the second one's going to be a purl stitch, and we are actually just going to continue like this. Just letting the old needle dangle off like that. And now I can just put these away, and I am inserting my stitch marker back, because from now on I need the beginning of my round to be marked. And now we're just going to continue to knit these rows of this we call ribbing. Knit and purl stitches we call ribbing. We're just going to continue knitting the same way for the amount of rows that you calculated for yourself. Okay, we're back. I knitted this. It's now 16 centimeters long, which is a bit more than 6 inches, which is twice the height of the color I want. So I actually now knitted enough of this so that I can go on to the next step, which is folding the neck. And now we're coming up with knitting it together. Now what we're doing is, when you see on the front here that you have a knit stitch, you're going to pick up a purl stitch from the back. Now, when I look at this line here, this is my first stitch, right? So this is the first gap where I need to pick up the stitch from. So right here. Now I'm always going to take my left needle and pick up the stitch from back here. So here I have a knit stitch, meaning from back here I need to pick up a purl stitch. Now I'm going to just grab this bump, the upper bump, and now I'm going to insert my needle through the both of them knitwise. So as to knit, I'm going to insert my needle, doing the same thing with pulling the yarn around and pulling it through. Now my next stitch back here I know is a knit stitch, so I'm going to take the little bump to the left of my knit stitch again, so that you see it. Here's the knit stitch, so I'm going to take the bump to the left of it onto my needle, and then again, now we're going to actually knit all stitches. You don't have to purl anymore, so I'm inserting my needle through both knitwise, pulling the yarn around and pulling it through. And now we're just going to continue this way until we knitted all the stitches together, until you're back at the stitch marker. Now we're actually switching to the larger needle size. We're actually going back to size 8mm needles, because we're actually going to start on the yoke now. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Now, from your calculations, you know how many stitches you need for the sleeves and you need for the neck and the back. And our raglan stitches are actually 3 stitches wide. So what we're first doing is we're actually here, our beginning of the round is the marker before our first 3 raglan stitches. So because we're knitting and transferring it onto the 8mm at the same time, we're going to quickly set this aside and put it in at the end again. Okay, so I'm just going to let this needle be, and I'm just going to knit the first 3 stitches onto my new needle here, onto the 8mm needle. And now I'm going to place the first marker. I already made my markers ready here. One designates the make one rights and one designates the make one lefts. And then we have, I got only 3 of these because we have a different color to indicate our beginning of round. So now I'm actually getting my marker that designates my left side, where I will later make one left. So I'm just going to put this in and then continue knitting. For me, it's going to be first 7 stitches for the first sleeve. So I'm going to knit 7 now. Now I'm actually at the point where I will later make one right. So I'm going to get one of the markers that designates a right and put that in, and then I'm going to knit 3 again. These are again the in-between stitches of the raglan. 1, 2, and 3, and I'm getting another marker designating the left. Now I know that I need to make 10 stitches for the front and back section, so I'm going to actually knit 10 now. I'm going to put a right marker in again. I will kind of from time to time pull the needle out here so that I can move my stitches up. And now I'm knitting another 3, which again is for the raglan stripe that we will get. And then I'm placing a left marker again. And now I'm back at 7 stitches. This is the second sleeve, so I'm knitting 7 again. I'm knitting the stitches for the second sleeve. And now I am placing an orange one again for designating my right side, and then I'm knitting 3 again. 1, 2, 3, another raglan, putting in purple, and now I should be having another 10, so let's see. Okay, so it worked out perfectly. I just knitted 10, meaning everything went well. I didn't miscount, and now I will place my beginning of round marker back in, which in this case is my pink marker. And now we've made our setup, which means that your project should be looking. So now we're coming to our first regular round. So this is our round 1, our first increase round. Now first I slipped the marker onto this needle, and now I'm going to always knit these 3 raglan stitches. And then whenever I come to the left side of the stitch, I'm going to slip the marker. We're looking at the in-between of our stitch now. So here you see that here we have kind of a bridge, right? This strand here. You see it very clearly here. And when we're on the left side, we're making one left. This is easy to remember. On the left side of our 3 raglan stitches, we're making one left. And you're making one left by picking up this strand with your left needle from the front, left from the front. And now I'm going to actually be knitting it through the back loop, not through the front here as usually, but I'm actually going to be knitting it through the back. So I'm tilting it so you can see it. I'm inserting my needle below here like this. I'm grabbing the strand and I'm pulling it through. And I knitted it through the back loop now, and I made one stitch that leans to the left. Now I'm going to knit all the stitches for my sleeve, for my first sleeve part, until I come to the next stitch marker. Arrive at a right stitch marker, which in my case is an orange one. We're actually going to make the increase before the marker. There are always going to be 3 stitches between the 2 markers. This stripe is not going to grow, it's going to always stay 3 stitches wide. We're making the increase to the right and to the left of it. So now we're making one right, but we're actually grabbing it from behind. And now that we grabbed it from behind, we are actually going to knit it through the front loop. So I sometimes take my thumb here and pull the strand a bit over so that I actually have a gap to insert my needle into. Now I inserted my needle, yarning over and knitting the stitch, and now I made one right. I'm going to slip my stitch marker here. I'm going to knit my 3 raglan stitches. And now we're actually back at making one left, which I already showed to you, but I'm just going to quickly do it. Left, we're always going in from the front and knitting through the back loop. And then we're just continuing this way until we arrive at our last stitch right in front of the beginning of the round marker, which is where I'll meet you again. Okay, so I continued this way, and now I'm in front of my beginning of round marker. Now, because this beginning of round marker also designates the right side of one of our raglan sequences. This means when we have an increase round as we have now, we will also need to make a right leaning increase in this last stitch before we actually start our new round. So now on the right side of my marker, so I make one right again, so going in from behind, getting the strand from behind, and then knitting it through the front loop. And then I'm slipping my marker, and now I'm on my second round. And we will always switch between making one round increases, which was the round we just did, and then in the next round we are going to knit all stitches. So always one round with raglan increases and one round just knitting all stitches, no increases. Now in these rounds we are just going to slip our markers without doing anything, but I actually want to show you something here. It might happen that you forget if you're on an increase round or not. Now I can actually see this. When I slip my marker, I can look at the strands here. And before you saw that there was one strand that was visible quite well. Here you now see that there are two strands. Whenever we have like two strands that are very tightly together, that means we're on a round where we're supposed to knit the stitches. If you're knitting maybe a bit absent-mindedly and you forget, whenever you get in front of a right marker or after a left marker, then you can look at the gap and find out. And then, so you're going to continue like this, always making one round with increases and then knitting the stitches for one round for the number of rows that you calculated that your yoke, which is the upper body part, needs to kind of gain in length. So continuing the exact same way, and you will see that it starts to grow. Okay, so I'm just going to take the strand of, this is Suri alpaca. I'm taking Suri alpaca because it's a bit thicker and to kind of stay with alpaca because my base yarn is an alpaca as well. And now I'm just going to, I just held it as if it were one yarn strand, and I'm just going to continue knitting normally. I left a little tail here, but I'm just going to continue knitting as if this were just one strand. And nothing really changes, like it's actually quite easy. Just hold two strands instead of one, and it adds a nice touch of color. So I'm going to continue with this for a few rows. I've essentially knitted 10 rows, holding both strands together. And then I just cut it, and now I'm just going to leave it be. I'm not going to continue knitting with this, and I'm just going to now be knitting 10 rows again without any additional color, only the main strand, and that's kind of how we then create the stripes. I prepared our longer cable, our 100 centimeter or 40-inch cable, and put one stitch stopper on one end, and the other end I left be. And now I'm going to pull out the right needle of our project, and I'm going to insert the pin here, and I'm going to twist it off. So I'm taking away the right needle and leaving the left one on. Now I'm putting the stitch stopper on to where I just twisted off the right needle and securing it nicely, and then I'm going to take the cable that has no stitches on it yet and put the 8mm needle back onto this cable. And now I'm just going to continue knitting, and this first stitch here after this gap, I'm just going to pull on the strand here quite well so that there isn't a gap, and then I'm just going to knit as before. Nothing different in technique, we're doing the exact same thing, and just doing that until all stitches are on my new cable. And then I can, once I'm done, I can twist the 8mm needle off of the smaller cable and put it onto the new cable here on the side where I now have a stitch stopper, and then I can just continue knitting as if nothing happened. So it's very easy actually. So that's very easy to do. Okay, I knitted another 10 rows with just white, and now I'm going to join the next color in the same way again. And I'm going to knit another 10 rows with this color, but because in a few rows I'm going to split off the arms, I'll meet you back before the next color change. So the next time you'll see me, I will have finished all my rows for the yoke and will be sectioning off the sleeves. Whew. This was quite a long first part, but by now we arrived at the end of our yoke. Next week we're going to continue on the body, which is kind of this part here, and then in the last week we're going to make the sleeves, and I hope that you'll be entertained until next week, that you have enough to do. If not, then I'm sorry, then you might have to wait, but yeah. Do consider subscribing, sharing this with your friends, liking the video, commenting, sharing it on your socials. Do all the things if you find it useful and if you like it. It's going to help me a lot. The larger this channel becomes, the more I can actually do this and keep on doing it. So I would be very grateful if you could consider doing that.